Good day. Welcome to the virtual concert halls, broadcasting live from Vienna, Virginia. Our online broadcasting platform is dedicated to streaming live performances and panel discussions. We connect musicians with their audiences and with each other. We are an independent virtual stage for classical musicians, educators of all instruments and music related disciplines, for music promoters, supporters, and for music lovers. Our guests join our program from their own locations around the world. They bring and share their musical gifts, their expertise, their personalities, their dreams. We present our guests' opinions, and we hope that our audience will benefit from hearing different and maybe sometimes conflicting points of view on classical music, aesthetics, business, and other topics which we raise throughout our programs. We would like to also thank our partners for supporting many performing artists and our programs. Studio Nature, company located in Finland, presents all musical artists, sound artists, and spoken word artists around the world a unique opportunity to have their songs, sound pieces played in video, documented in the Finnish nature scenery. Beautiful company, please check it out. Drama Queen Graphics is located in the United States. It helps performing and visual arts groups engage with their audiences through eye catching graphic design and branding solutions that stand out and demand attention. And welcome now to our today's presentation Musicians Innovators. We hope you enjoy being with us today. Now, I would like to welcome our first guest, composer Robert Voisey. Welcome, Robert. Very good to see you today.
All right, good to see you too, Anna. Thank you for having
Yeah, Robert, you have been a very important mover and shaker of the composers community for many years now. Your New York based programs showcased newly written music by nearly 1,000 living composers since 2003. Is that about right?
a bunch.
Yeah. So you had your programs presented in countries around the world. You're an accomplished composer yourself. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I'm going to take the whole program just to list what you've done. When I look at all those things, it just seems impossible for one person to accomplish all of that and be that productive. Are you sure that you're the one person who did all of this? But seriously, I'm honored to welcome you on our virtual stage. Um, how did you come up with your vision? Where did your ideas come from? For instance, the 60 by 60, the 15 minutes of fame, and the rest of it, all that it encompasses a vision. Where did you come up with that vision?
It's all the mother of necessity, right? You find the tool that you need for the time that you've got. The composer's voice first started when I came to New York, and I needed a venue to present my own music. So I started with composer's voice, and there was five or six of my friends and colleagues. They needed to present their music too, so I figured, well, why not put us all on, pool resources, and we got a bunch of musicians and found a venue, and that was the first composer's voice concert we did. 60 by 60 in a lot of ways was in a similar vein, except with electronic music. Again, I wanted a venue to be able to present the plethora of electronic music that's out there, and so I thought of a unique way to do it.
So what I'm hearing you say is you're a practitioner. You had a practical goal. Okay, let's try to present the music. But how does we all have that practical goal, except that not all of us grow the way you have grown. How did that happen?
Um, well, so I'm fortunate to like when I started Vox Novus. So Vox Novus was my company. Now I'm, you know, I'm the son of two accountants. So when I decided that, okay, I'm going to be a composer, this is going to be my career. I'm in the United States. We need tax write-offs, right? And so forth. So, you make a company, and you got to have your company, and you do all that and so forth. So immediately, I mean, this was in 1999, and I noticed that you needed it was just the beginning of the web, and you needed an internet presence. And I have a computer background, so I could make my own website, and I did. And I researched a little bit of that and so forth, and I made it. And in fact, my first Vox Novus project was actually the American Composer Timeline.
If I may ask you, Vox Novus is an interesting name. How did you come up with a name?
I just
what does it mean? And
new voice, kind of in bad Latin, but and that's it. Anyway, it's a little bit of a pun off of my name, but I was just like, I was getting out there. I was young, so I was just like, look at me, new voice and new music. Let's put my stamp out there, and and I for the time, I didn't see like a huge amount of organizations. Sort of, it wasn't easy to embrace. So that's why I just figured out, well, I'll start off by myself, and I'll find my niche or wherever I need to go to. So I had the ability to start Vox Novus, and then when I was getting ready to start Composer's Voice, and I was like, okay, how am I going to get my music out there? I did an email blast. More than just an email blast. I mean, I wrote 100 letters, sent out 100 emails, made telephone calls to any and everybody. Basically, like, I'm a composer here in New York. I'd be happy to send you my music. I'm looking to produce a concert. How do I do it? Because nobody ever. When I have a very traditional education, so I was never taught to do that. And out of all of that, like 100 emails and stuff like that, I got one response. From this guy all the way out in California. Is like, I don't know how you do it in New York, but
But you got only one response. That could be tremendously discouraging. Do you remember how you related to that?
Yeah. So, well,
did you get discouraged that it's only one response out of 150? What do I do now?
So, I mean, I was a little bit discouraged that that I was going about it the wrong way. It was troubling because I just thought it didn't seem like that crazy of a question, and I was waiting for, kind of
more support, more.
Well, it's like when you ask a simple question, sometimes people scratch their heads like, oh, why don't you know this? And so I was expecting like maybe a little impatience or something like that. I didn't expect the void, at least not as much of the void as because some were like institutions I had asked this question to, of which, so as Vox Novus, over the years, I've gotten plenty of questions. Now old saying, there are no dumb questions. Like if somebody's asking a question, they're just sincerely wanting to know the answer. So if it's a simple answer, just
give it.
Give it and move on. It's no, first of all, you never know. It might be an opportunity or something, but we're all in it together. So, help to every single person. So I was a little bit troubled that the institutions didn't answer me, and
Mhm.
I yeah, at the time, it was definitely discouraging.
So, do you want to say that by not receiving straightforward answers and not being able to follow some beaten path, was that the motivation for you to create those new ways of connecting composers to their audience?
Absolutely. Back, there was the American Music Center, and what they were providing was, no composers had their own web pages. So they provided a service that you could go and pay them per hour, and they would make a website for you.
Mhm.
Um, like I said, 1999. This is before all of this stuff, and so it was at the time for a new composer, it was a little bit expensive,
Mhm.
and I was just like, well, I think I can do it myself, and then I did Vox Novus. But when I didn't get like a response from the American Music Center, I was just like, well, that doesn't seem very helpful. So, and they were definitely like an institution for composers, and a great institution, but either, well, for whatever reason, I was just like, well, I would rather create Vox Novus and do the work opposed to relying on somebody else that
Mhm.
I wasn't so sure about.
I understand. This is very important for people to hear, I'm sure, because a lot of composers and performers um, hit that wall of no response and need to find ways how to proceed. And that can be very discouraging. I want to ask you another question.
Sure.
We never met in person. In fact, we only met online and just about a week ago. You're a very busy entrepreneur and a composer, and your schedule is full. But you've accepted our invitation to join our program without even a moment's hesitation. What made it a yes for you?
Well, you made it easy. That is,
Did we? Okay.
look, it's important, and the it seemed like a great idea. I mean, like like I said, when you run across people that like reach out to you, and I would be. I mean, when we first made contact, it was a little more than a week ago, but like there was a connection. I could see. I was looking at what you were doing. I was just like, oh, and when I see somebody of like mind and so forth, that even on LinkedIn, I'll reach out and so forth. I might just go, hey, love what you're doing or whatever.
Mhm.
And then there's you make that like connection. And I think it's important. I think that connection is actually very important, especially, well, like I said, I was fortunate when I did that email blast to run into Dwight Winiger, who is part of the Living Music Foundation, and and that connection like slowly grew because that was the guy. Then I went to him for a couple of things and so forth. He was a great guy. He was a really nice guy that like
Mhm.
to help me out with stuff. And those connections are important because you never know where it's going to lead to and so forth. And one of so unbeknownst to you, I've been a little bit, you're calling me busy, but I've been mostly busy with my 3-year-old son, like,
It's very busy, and that's wonderful.
and but in a slowly boiling on the back burner is this idea of like, what's next? What's going to be going on? And I've been thinking about,
And if I may interrupt,
sure.
Robert, we are going to be moving into those questions, and I would like to invite Jeffrey, who just finished his teaching at the piano festival. Welcome, Jeffrey. Thank you
Hello.
for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you here. And I know you probably just landed in this broadcast studio from another online event, right?
Yes, you can actually fly everywhere and not leave your house.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad we're laughing about it. Jeffrey, I want to welcome you to our program. It's an honor to have you here. And I just want to briefly introduce you to our viewers. You're an all round phenomenal musician. Your artistic diversity is amazing. You're an authority on just about all periods and styles of classical piano literature. You're a composer yourself. You regularly perform newly written music. Quite remarkably, you're also a pioneer of streaming live music through internet. In fact, as far as I know, you're the very first professional pianist musician who ever did that in 1997. I'm going to repeat that for everyone. 1997, 1997. That number just blows me away. I'm so honored and to welcome you on our stage. And I just want to ask you, how did you come up with the idea to live stream your performances through internet 23
Yeah.
years ago?
When I was a youngster, and I still am, like, at heart,
Of course
I,
you are.
what did I like? I loved television. I loved reruns. Remember that word? Reruns. Before they
Yeah.
called them repeats.
Yeah.
And to me, repeats are in music. You do the repeat. Reruns are reruns of TV shows. And I loved them, but television to me was. And okay, so I was born in '61, not so long after television started to have its first appearances. And I was always intrigued by how television could reach so many people and how it expanded and grew. And then in the 1990s, slowly computers were starting to become more fashionable, just like the television was in the 1950s. Not everybody had them. I didn't have them. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have an email address in 1997. None of that. And
Amazing.
I just thought, yeah. And I thought, well, how I love television and how it reaches so many people. Why can't we figure out how to get classical music instead of having constantly trying to bring people to us? Why don't we just bring us to them? And how can we
Incredible.
do this? And I thought, well, the computer looks like a television. Hey, if they could do it then, why can't we do it now? And fortunately, there was somebody at Steinway Hall in charge of the concert and artist division, Peter Goodrich. Peter was fabulous. And I brought him the idea, and we were like Lucy and Ethel Mertz. We would come up with these crazy things, and well, let's see what happens. If we end up in a wine vat, then whatever. But Steinway Hall became a wired up and tangled. You could have tripped if you didn't look where you were walking. Nothing was
I can imagine.
wireless. And everything was wired. There were wires everywhere. People came from Florida who were hired to come and produce this event. And it was streaming the internet. And the engineer was very smart, Norman Greenspan. He was a wonderful recording engineer and producer. And he said, I'm going to record this all on DAT. Remember DAT, digital
Yeah.
audio?
And
He says, I'm going to,
495, I think.
yeah.
That was the age of computers at 495.
Well, he recorded it on DAT to save. He says, you may want to release it as a recording one day. I said, but it won't be edited. It's all live. He says, good. And that's what we did. Actually, it was released on CD a few years after the concerts. And then last year, I put it on digital only on my own label. It's called Cyber Recital, a historic recital. And they took place in across from Carnegie Hall in Steinway Hall. And I asked Skitch Henderson, who was the founder and director of the New York Pops, because we had done the Leroy Anderson Concerto in Carnegie Hall in '94 or '95. So then I asked him in the early part of 1997, would you make the introductory remarks for this performance? And he did. And they are still in those recordings on YouTube, but they're on Real Audio, Real Player I haven't found anybody who could take those and transform them into what you see now.
Mhm.
So they look very archaic. They look old,
Gramophone
but
age.
it is. And you could actually see and hear him and then me playing. And I chose the 500,000th Steinway piano with that incredible art case with all the signatures of the Steinway artists inscribed. And it was available because Peter said, "Which piano would you like to use?" I said, "I think that would look really cool on a computer
So you were
screen."
not so concerned about how it sounds, huh? It
Everything.
was
No,
about the
it had to
look.
be. It had to sound good. It was a beautiful
Oh,
sounding
I'm sure.
piano. Yeah, no, that's always first and foremost. But I wanted something to sound great and look great for this, and
That's
it
important.
did.
It has to
Yeah,
sound and look great. Yeah.
yes, and it did. And it really came out nice. And so we did that concert. There was a delay in the first broadcasts, and a couple of hours or something.
Oh, wow. Now we
Yeah, but it
complain
came
about
out late. It was something, I don't know
point
what,
something a second latency.
something
You had a
happened.
2 hour latency.
It was the first time. It was
That's right.
something with a delay in people getting it. But then the producers came back 3 weeks later. It was July 25, same place, just we did it in the morning in Steinway Hall before they opened shop. And that streamed live. How did I know? My son was in school, and the school library had the internet high
Mhm.
speed T1 line or whatever they called it. And we made sure they were able to see and hear it before I started live. No interruption on the spot. And those were, so we combined, uh, I combined music from those recordings and made the audio release. But then a company in Amsterdam, Siteways, they were called, Siteways live stream, and they wanted to do the first European classical music live stream, so they brought me over there, and we did it there and in one of the museums, and little by little. But I had to do a lot of homework and make sure, you can't just say you're the first one to do something. You have to make sure,
You actually do
and
it.
you have to. Uh, some of the Van Cliburn competition was audio streamed. Philadelphia Orchestra did audio stream a little bit something. Earl Wild, when he was in Pittsburgh, did an audio stream in the early spring of '97. So, and I had to make sure of that this year too, because somebody wrote something on a blog. "You're not the first. You should check this out." So I called up Earl's partner, Michael. I said, "Tell me about that." And he says, "No, you did the first video. Earl's was audio. You're clean." I said, "Okay," because I don't want to rewrite history and say something wrong, but I'm always very, very careful to say anything unless it's true.
Hmm.
So it was. I mean, at the time, I didn't. I mean, I knew it was something different, but it was a challenge, and I thought, well, if this works, it's really kind of cool because it just will start setting a precedent for things to come. And then I remember finishing that, and I said, "Okay, let's do the first concerto with orchestra
Wow.
live stream." Now, I immediately that night I thought it's time we got to do a concerto. Then let's get a live video concerto. But that turned into orchestras and unions and how much do they pay and who owns the rights, and you got to pay the musicians. And I thought we're not there yet. We're just not there yet, and they still have things to deal with that today. I mean, you can
Of
only
course.
use like a certain amount of time if you want to promote something, but there's a lot of legalities involved with that still.
Well,
So
there's a lot of course, obstacles to climb,
yeah.
and you climbed it first.
Well, I
Jeffrey,
have a
I can't
my
believe I have you here on our program telling
oh,
us first person experience of live streaming from musician live streaming. It's just incredible.
well, we
So,
didn't know at the time it would ever go anywhere. You usually don't know at that time if something's going to go anywhere. But oh boy, so has it. And with everybody getting the speeds and the high speed and the definitions and all that. Of course, it's going to get better over time. But here we are. It's 23 years later. It's a
yes,
long time. But here we
unbelievable.
are.
You are an incredible person when it comes to connection. We never met in person before, and I just contacted you out of blue, and you didn't know who I was, and you're really booked all day long. We barely got you in the program from another um, big work you're doing, um, but you simply said yes.
Oh yeah,
What
yeah. No.
motivated you to take our invitation and come to the program?
I think the more we're out there and share what we're doing when we can, just it's important for music too, because I mean we're not here forever. I always tell my
True.
students, and composers when they're writing new concertos, I set the pace immediately about that. I said, something, they say, well, what do you want? What piece of that? I said, this isn't about me. I said, this is really not even about you. It's about music. This is about us being part of this train going by. You know, we're all part of the continuum, and the music's evolving, and we just want to be part of it so that, you write something that in 50 years from now, people could look back and say, hey, just check out that concerto that so-and-so wrote. They're not going to say they wrote it for me. That's not important, but it's that they wrote it and that it exists. And it's very important to have music that is part of the time you're in. We're so used to playing great music from 1,000 million years ago, but still here. And there's composers that are alive and well, and they need to make a living, and they're here to do a purpose. They're here to write music. So I thought, we need to have new piano concertos. Let's have as many as we can. So, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's raising money. And I mean, I have a couple of pieces, 3 pieces that were scheduled for this year, next year, and now pushed into the following year. Hopefully, we'll get there. So I'll have 3 premieres next year, and I've already started a project for the year 23-24. It's a very special 50-state project, and funding's already been going on before pandemic. And once we have vaccines, once we're starting to open the doors again to potential concerts, and there looks to be a light at the end of the tunnel, I'm going to bring this project, open it
On
up
stage.
again when it's
Of
right.
course.
This timing is important, but it's a very important project. It celebrates something old with something new, and it'll be exciting. We're not there yet, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Can I ask you to perform something for us and for our viewers?
Yeah. Sure. How about something serious and then something light? We do
Oh, that would
Chopin
be
and then
great.
Gershwin. Gershwin loved Chopin, but that'll come later. I'm going to play a work that almost everybody knows, the Chopin work, and then I'll play Gershwin's first published piano piece. I say
Oh,
first published piano piece because there was another piece that was published before that, a song. This is the first published piano piece. But first I'll do Chopin's Ballade Number 1 out of the 4, the first one
oh,
in G minor. I love this piece.
beautiful. Oh, I
I,
love this
and I
piece.
played this concert last night and for Sonata Piano Camp, which is based in Vermont. It's a 50-year-old institution run by Polly Vanderlinde, and I taught this morning all morning, and then had a lecture on technique. And just came. That's why I was dressed like this for the lecture. And I said to them, I wore this last night, the same shirt, different shirt, but same style. I said, I didn't sleep in this shirt, I promise. But we did a full technical regime, and here we are. So I did not get to tune up the piano a little. I mean, I have my little, I have this little gadget. Big deal. Thank God for this.
Oh,
But
thank God
I
for this. I have one right behind me.
gosh, I'm telling you, I'm not a piano tuner, but I do my best. I got a couple of broken strings in there
Yeah,
since, I mean, I haven't had the technician in here yet, and I won't yet.
yeah,
We want to be very careful.
yeah.
And
Same here.
he knows. So yeah, we do what we do. So if you hear a little bit out of tune for the Gershwin, it'll be great. It'll sound like Tim Panelli, but for Chopin, it's going to be a little out of tune.
It's
So
probably going to sound a
Chopin,
bit
I got
more
to get into.
authentic. I doubt Chopin had perfectly
Oh, it
tuned
will be.
pianos.
Oh, that could be. That could be. I have to do. I always tell my students when they're playing, I said, okay, if you were my student in an acting class, I'd say go out of the room, get into character, and come back in. I have to go get into character for Chopin because right now I'm acting a little silly. And it's
Of
because I'm
course.
getting cabin fever.
Of
Anyway,
course.
let me put the mic over there and take the headphones off, and I will attempt this ballade number
Jeffrey, if you want
1.
us to take you off the frame for a couple of minutes, I can talk about something else.
I'm
Or
good.
you
I'm
okay?
ready to
You
go.
good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Okay.
Take your time.
See if that works. Good. Okay.
Bravo, bravo, bravo,
You know
Jeffrey.
something
Thank
something
you
scared
so
me.
much.
I was very
Is it-
scared because I looked over and I saw a blank screen, and I thought,
Oh,
oh, I think my computer just totally died.
oh
I saw
no.
nothing. I thought, should I stop and see? And then I came over. I heard you, and I thought, oh, good, it didn't. It didn't
No,
come
no,
back.
nothing happened. We
Oh
could
my
hear
gosh!
you.
I saw a blank screen, and I thought, and I must have a screensaver on there. After a certain amount of time, it goes out. I'm going to
Probably.
turn it on to 800 minutes. So it'll never.
Oh my
That
God.
was that. I really thought that was it was over.
No, everything was fine. Everything was fine.
Oh,
And it was
good.
absolutely phenomenal to feel this presence of your talent and your
Oh, thank you.
beautiful music. Thank you. Such a gift, Jeffrey. It's an incredible. Bravo.
Oh, thank
Such
you.
an
Thank you.
experience.
Thank you.
I, if I may interrupt and just ask you one more question.
Sure.
Um, in 2003, you wrote a story which is completely fascinating to me, Through the Wings. And by
Yes.
the way, our second guest in the program, Robert, the 2003 was the year when he embarked on his incredible journey of reconnecting the living composers with their audience and reinventing the whole scenery of how newly written music can be again made accessible to people. So there's this numbers which seem to connect.
Yes.
So, but anyway, I read the story, and it takes place in the future.
Yes.
In fact, in 2061. Can you please tell us about it?
I don't know why I wrote this. When I was a little kid, I used to like to write scripts and science fiction things, and I think a lot of them I got rid of over. I should never have done that, but I had ideas for future things and wrote stories. I did, and just let them. I don't know where they are, but this one I wrote, and it was set on my would-be 100th birthday, which is in 2061, and it goes back in time. But I put things in there that never existed. I concocted ideas of recording things, things that go on little vid chips and things that what are those? One day you see, oh, do you have a little vid chip to put in it? It's got the complete catalog of all of this and that, all in this little itty bitty chip, and it just goes right in your computer. We're not there yet, and so I came up with this idea of the concerts in the future called virtual concert hall. Concerts. You can go to my website, it's jeffreybeagle.com, and on the left side says author, but that's where the short story is.
Exactly.
I wrote it really before 2003 because I may have written it out shortly after the internet concert. Just I left it there, and then I finally, when I got a computer, put it into Microsoft Word, and then I sent it to the copyright office. So the copyright's 2003, but it was written before. That's why I always tell my students, don't look at opus numbers, look at when the piece was written, because they could have written this thing 30 years before it got published. So the opus number is not really when it was composed. So I wrote it really before that, but I envisioned that there would be virtual concert halls and people would be performing much more on the internet. And I got this
And here we are.
virtual concert halls. Like, oh, well, okay.
Okay, be careful what you envision, right?
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
But this
exactly.
this was a good thing to wish for.
Yes, it is. I believe so too.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, this is unbelievable that it's really happening. Your 20-year-old fantasy of a virtual hall, and look at the logo, virtual concert halls. That's where we are.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
would you like
Good.
to? Would you like to move to the next presentation of
Yes. So I'll make
music
this
at
brief
the
because I know
concert
you have
hall?
another guest. Let me do Gershwin. So the first
Okay.
piece that Gershwin published for piano is the Rialto Ripples, 1916. It's like a rag, actually. A lot of his early music, ragtime was a big deal back then, and there were composers from all over the world writing rags that most people never heard of. And there's been very good dissertations and projects of doctoral students doing their dissertations on ragtime. We had somebody at Brooklyn College where I teach. Came as a guest from somewhere else and tried out his program. Said, "Where'd you find all this music? This is incredible." And so this is really one of Gershwin's earliest. It was his first piano piece published. I don't know if he wrote piano music before this, but he was young. He was a young guy, and here it is, Rialto Ripples.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. So we're moving from Chopin to Rag, first published piano piece by Gershwin. And we have Jeffrey Beagle here, phenomenal pianist, performing for us live. What a great fun piece.
And then he writes Rhapsody in Blue just a few years later.
Yeah. Can you see
Genius.
that?
Genius.
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 And it's amazing how you just pull out. Okay, I'll just play the Chopin Ballade, and over here I got this unique piece. Let me introduce you to what Gershwin did when he was young.
Can you
So
imagine in 100 years from now what they'll do? Who knows? We haven't even heard the rest of this century. So
I'm afraid to ask you, Jeffrey, what people will do in 100 years from now. You may pinpoint to exactly what people will be doing.
I hope they're playing.
We are going to make sure of it. We're going to be playing. You're going to be playing.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be playing.
Absolutely.
That is not going away ever.
No.
Thank you, Jeffrey, so much for amazing playing, for making my day. Please don't go away. We'll move to Robert's presentation. Please stay with us because I'll be back to our panel.
Yes, definitely. Okay.
Okay. And now we will re-invite again Robert. Robert, welcome again. And now the stage is yours.
Thank you. So, you were talking about 2003, about putting together some projects, and I guess that was the beginning of my most well-known project, which was 60 by 60, and we were talking about trying to get giving opportunities for composers to hear it. And at the time, I was an electronic composer. I had just been studying at Brooklyn College and was kind of reintroduced to computers and music and so forth. And I just saw this huge cornucopia of electronic music that's being written and performed. And it was basically unknown, and audiences didn't get to hear it and so forth. So that's when I decided, well, what type of concert would be fun for people to come and hear a large body of electronic music. And what I thought was just, anyway, there was a couple of hurdles to overcome. But what I thought was if every composer could submit like a 1 minute piece of the type of music that they do, we would just put it back to back without pause and synchronize it to a big giant analog clock. And then you would have an hour performance of 60 different works by 60 different composers just streaming away. And we did our first performance in 2003 in New York City, down in the East Village. And naturally, with electronic music, it was one of the ideas was that it was really easy to transport at any time. We would put it on a CD. Back then, CDs were the big deal. And you could mail it to anybody, and they could just play this concert anywhere as long as they had a clock, 2 speakers, everything was stereo audio, and then go. So naturally, people wanted to collaborate, and we first started with video, and I believe it was 2007 that we collaborated with dance, and 60 by 60 dance is kind of the crown jewel in the 60 by 60 project, where it's 60 composers and their works, and we pair it up with 60 choreographers and their dancers to do a live dance performance. And it's been pretty wild. We've done over 30 performances of 60 by 60 dance all over the world, in London, New York City, Montreal, Toronto, St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbus, Ohio. So it was a great way to collaborate, because all the performances that we did of the dance were by local choreographers and dancers. And then they're getting paired with this electronic music from around the world. So it was a great way to introduce this wild and eclectic music to artists that wouldn't normally have picked it. And then because it's such a sort of spectacle extravaganza, it was, attracted a lot of audiences. And then we introduced them to, the wild world of modern dance and contemporary composition. I actually have one of my pieces called New York. That's one of the sample pieces of mine to photo montage of the dance in London. I think if we could cue that up and play that, that would be awesome. Or not. Here. Yeah, I love that final shot of the entire audience. I mean, the entire casting.
That's phenomenal. Bravo. That is a spectacle.
Yeah, there were 180 dancers in that production. It was really
amazing. Really and the expressiveness of the dance and the music, the connect was just unbelievable. Bravo, that is This is really impressive production. I wanted to ask you if you don't mind, or I can do it at the end. I have a bunch of questions.
Go for it.
Question now or at the end?
Question, hit me.
Okay. During our pre-production meeting, I remember you mentioned that there was a fundamental break or disconnect between the living composers and the audience. And I don't know, I think you pointed out to even some specific period shortly after World War II. And I think today musicians feel that disconnect, which you mentioned, and many would agree that there is disconnect. What I saw is this amazing connection between your music and the dance expression. If you want to answer now or save it to later, fine. But what do you believe caused the disconnection, and what do you see the solutions are?
Well, I mean, I think the disconnect was kind of a natural phenomenon that happened because of World War II. You know, it was definitely a crazy time and so forth. And after the war, artists felt that they needed to distance themselves from what came before, but more of like what sort of what the regime kind of forced upon Europe and at the time, and it changed all art pretty dramatically. And at least on the composer side, you know, I think that the sort of leaders of contemporary composition at the time, you know, took a very different approach to music, and they weren't really interested in audiences wanting it. They were looking to establish like a new school and a new type of doing music, and they got into their institutions and then basically said, you know, this is it, and you know, if you don't like it, you should learn to like it. And from that point on, it was sort of a tradition of doing, you know, stuff that was counter to everything that came before World War II, which is great because it was a revolution of a lot of different things. And there was no care about the audience or their reaction to it, because they felt that the audiences were stuck. And then probably at the same time, you know, the advent of radio became really popular. So when people were going to look for music, they gravitated towards radio, which was very pop and so forth. So, you know, and you know, folk music and so forth that really spoke to them. So, you know, it made a big giant divide, and that happened for a really long time until maybe like the 70s or 80s, when I think composers started to reach out and want to be heard by audiences, more importantly. And so now, yeah, that's but you know, the sort of tradition, if you want to call it that, has been made, where, you know, when like 60 by 60, like it's an electronic project, and I just felt that a lot of audiences didn't know what electronic music was, even though we had a huge history from the 40s and 50s.
Exactly.
And but they didn't even think they were really welcome in the theater to hear it. First of all, it was really strange for them to be like, so I go into a hall and there's just two speakers. I was like, well, yeah, that's it. I was actually shocked that there were concert hall producers that looked at me as if I was crazy about that sort of notion. I feel like that's not really nowadays. Audiences are very willing to have speaker concerts, or they just see it as like, of course there's speakers because it's a stage production, or some innovative media project and so forth. But back then, there just wasn't so many. So that's been, I feel the main drive for me, especially, is to sort of reconnect with audiences and people to,
That-
welcome.
yeah, that's so wonderful what you're doing, really bringing together the audience's expectation and maybe even introducing the audience to something they didn't expect at first, but it's okay to try it out, and people get introduced and composers get feedback from more than just their colleagues. Can we see more of your samples of the project? Do you have more?
Sure. I mean, so yeah. So a similar project that I do is Composer's Voice, which is a very, well, it started off very traditional as a chamber concert. It's the oldest project of Vox Novus, and it, yeah, that was a phenomenal pianist, Matthew Macwrite. We actually just presented him in for his debut at Carnegie Hall just last November, and we'll be releasing a CD of that music, and he presented 8 different contemporary compositions from composers from all throughout the U.S. And it's so that's kind of where it leads to kind of what's next. Because I just got a notice from Carnegie the other day that they aren't going to have concerts until January of next year. And so that leaves for like kind of a big giant gap for contemporary music and all like chamber music for the immediate future. And that's where I was getting to thinking about kind of what's next and what to do. I have this other project called 15 Minutes of Fame, which is a spin-off of 60 by 60. Basically, everybody wanted to do 1 minute acoustic pieces. And anyway, the logistics of that, when I was doing 60 by 60 was pretty intense. And there were some other projects that were 1 minute. I didn't want to step on their toes and things like that. So, but one of my collaborators basically said, "Oh yeah, we have a pianist who wants to do it, and let's get a whole bunch of composers to write for you, like a dedicate a piece for you." And so we did 15 1-minute pieces for piano. We called it 15 Minutes of Fame, and then from there on, we did the debut concert and stuff like that, and musicians loved it, and they started. We started doing 15 Minutes of Fame. These like putting out a call for a particular musician or ensemble, and we would get anywhere between 30 to 150 works, and then the musician or ensemble would like go through them and pick their 15 favorite for performance, which we usually did on Composer's Voice, actually. So that would be one of our staple projects that we would present, and then we would present longer pieces. Um, like an example of this is a great flutist that we had from Brazil, and she did 15 Minutes of Fame, and I think I have a piece of for her before Covacado. Maybe if we could cue that up. So. And yeah,
That is such an interesting piece. So you present 15 of those back to back. Do they form more or less like a coherent presentation?
it yes, yes, yes. In general, yes. It would be 15 Minutes of Fame was a little bit looser than 60 by 60. I mean, because it's live, there tends to be a little bit more fluidity, and because most of the 60 by 60 mixes were curated by me, and all the other audio curators were definitely like chosen by me and stuff. So we talked a lot about like how 60 by 60 should go as like an hour performance. 15 Minutes of Fame was kind of different. Like I said, in the beginning, I wasn't even sure if it was really a functional idea. And when all the musicians wanted to do it, I was just like, well, why not? And so each musician and ensemble that comes to it, brings their own aesthetic and their own ideas. So
and that's really fabulous. That each one pitches in their own shaped aesthetics. And I just want to mention that we're partnering now with Robert, and we'll start presenting 15 Minutes of Fame. In fact, in just a few short weeks, we'll be launching 15 Minutes of Fame on the virtual concert halls. And I'm so excited about that project. This is extraordinarily interesting.
it'll be really fun. And we've got already lined up some of our past like great players and things like that. And but also like I love so kind of like what's next. And
yeah, and that actually brings me to our panel discussion question. If you don't mind my interrupting, I'd like to invite Jeffrey back to our panel, because that's exactly where we're heading with our questions. What's next? These are the questions which are currently, for many musicians, essential. And I'm in contact with a lot of colleagues, and many musicians feel tremendous pressure caused by the current disconnect from the audience. It's artificial, of course, because of the situation, but nonetheless, it feels like it's real. For many people, the problem does not become a call for action, but rather causes deep despair. And I would say it can be. I can understand it can be paralyzing to wake up in the morning and remember that our concert seasons are pretty much canceled. I would say for majority of us, and if not, then on indefinite hold or on the question mark. We will try to social distance our concert in the physical concert hall, and we will see how it goes. Okay, well, what about my concert scheduled for February? We don't have the answer yet, and it's understandable. We can't have definite answers. We don't know what's going to happen, and so we don't really know when and how we're going back on the physical stage. You are doing what you're doing in this situation. You're not crushed by despair and dark view of the future. How do you find your personal motivation for going forward with what you are doing and what you did in the past? Whoever wants to take my question first, but I would like to hear both of you pitching. How about Jeffrey? You start. We haven't heard
Sure.
you in a
Well,
while.
it's interesting. Way back, piano recitals were the big deal. More people went to conservatories than they still do learning all the standard repertoire, the classical solo repertoire. Yet, so many of the concert engagements over the last 20, 25 years have leaned more toward concertos. So the students who are learning all the standard solo work in the conservatories, when they graduate, they don't realize they need to, if they even want to have a shot at a career, they have to have at least 15 to 20 piano concertos at the ready. And now that they're not going to be playing concertos as quickly, it's a good time to learn them. But I actually feel that the first steps are going to be the return of recitals. There's nothing to worry about social distancing for a piano and a piano soloist, except for the audience, which would be in any situation. But I think that it would be advantageous for musicians and concert organizers to start to really put thought into the revival, a real revival of the recital industry that kind of faded out. Usually it'd be people playing their recitals for graduating schools, or for competitions, early rounds before the big finals with the orchestra, or big name soloists playing the few recital opportunities that are out there. But now is a really good opportunity, that with the idea that orchestras will have to start to return slowly. We don't know how. I think composers should start to do what Stravinsky did and write, the neoclassical style. I mean, maybe they can do the neo-impressionist style now. Write for smaller ensembles. Be ahead of the eight ball. Write for smaller ensembles. Have them available, so that when we do return, we have what we need. Have recital opportunities start to come. And have the students continue to learn the solo repertoire. I think that's very important. Was and will be more so now, I think. My students at Brooklyn College I've asked them to compose music now, since they're not in school. And, they're all filled up with emotions. And, even though they're always playing and learning other people's music, why can't they write something? This is the
Exactly.
perfect time for people to not just think of recreating, which there are no opportunities for right now, but to create. And why can't they come up with something? So we're going to put together a solo piano book when they have it all finished, and I'll look and see if we can get them published. But we need to have music representative of this time, whether they're performed now or not. It's a very emotional time, and this is a good time for composers to just really write. I have three people that are writing for me now. One is The Planets by Dan Pertut. Now, Dan composed this before the pandemic, but now he's orchestrating the orchestra part for The Planets. And it has nothing to do with the Holst. It's an original work for piano and orchestra, but the orchestration is going to reflect what he feels now.
Of course.
Jim Stevenson's writing a concerto. He's going to write it. Hopefully he's doing it now while he has time. And a young composer from Iran is writing a work for piano, orchestra, and chorus for me, Farhad Popel. And then this other big project's going to come after. But I think it's a good time for composers and even people who don't compose to do it, because it's a period of time they're going to look back and say, what was written during the time of COVID? and what's going
Exactly.
to come out of it. So why not? So there's always a before, during, and after, and we will
Mhm.
get through this. And yes, maybe in time you'll have the full orchestras playing everything again because we'll be healthy to do it and not worry as much. But for now, we have to take baby steps again.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Now
I'm
to
also,
Europe.
yeah. I mean, I guess it all comes down to like need, right? There's I've been thinking about like what's the next step, and I've been looking a lot
Hmm.
into video. And I've been working on a culture program for public access TV here. Um, but I was thinking about like 15 minutes of fame and like doing having that presentation and a little bit of a feedback and kind of a master class and panels talking about that music and so forth. I was just thinking, and I love the idea. I can't wait to be doing it. But I was also thinking about like, oh, it's an opportunity to venture into something even uh, more exploratory. Like, um, why not, instead of one musician playing 15 pieces, now it would be easy to have 15 musicians or 15 flutists um, perform just one piece that they selected from like a pool, and then they could perform it live, streaming. But not just that, maybe we can also connect with choreographers, 15 different choreographers in different venues, with their dance ensembles. And, why not just throw in doing some live video? And so, maybe everybody can be on some green screen, or we could use like some, and then make a true, uh, like a live performance that actually can't be done live in a theater. It's just, it would be technically too difficult, or just, um, I always I always loved a composer with one of his styles of music. Used like these huge amounts of samples, and but they were like from orchestras and different pieces from all over the place. And he just saw it as uh, like, what's the right word? Uh, Super gratuitous in the fact that he could take one little sample from some obscure instrument and put it in like a 20-minute piece. Normally,
Interestingly, the unusual instrument. I'm not sure. Do we have a sample of your performance, your presentation of singing, which is sounding unusual? Were we able to? My technical team, were we able to have that ready, or should we postpone it till we can bring it up and um,
we can
on
post
the?
we can postpone it. Anybody
Okay.
anybody could go online and see my singing if they want.
Really wanted to show that, and you're speaking exactly about using unusual sounds and unusual instruments, and always looking for something new. You call it obscure, but it's not necessarily obscure. Maybe
Yeah,
interesting spin on something.
yeah.
Okay, if I when I get a nod from my team that it's ready for display, guys, I'm going to interrupt you because we really want to hear that piece. Okay, go on.
So anyway, from a young age, I used to do some throat singing. So and when I became
I
old,
didn't want to spit out the word
yeah,
because I wanted to keep it for a
and
surprise.
and when I became older, I became acquainted to the tradition of it and tried to perfect it a little bit. And so this piece melting that I did is just kind of an experimentation with throat singing and putting it in a kind of a traditional way for audiences to hear what it is.
So while my team is getting the sample of it ready, we're going to move to my next question. And if we can have Jeffrey back in the frame, because I want to ask both of you guys about the going sentiment in connection with doing what we are doing right now in this moment, which is live streaming our music and our discussion. And there is a going sentiment among the classical musicians that the profession may be hitting a mountain too tall to climb. And by that, what I mean is there's this people are torn in between the recordings being fabulous representation potentially of the biggest heights of their ability to perform, because of, obviously you can record, you can edit, and you can improve the sound that way. But it also, being fabulous and great in perfection, it lacks the vibe of the live performance and the live connection between the artist and the audience. Now, on the other hand, performing live over internet poses its own mammoth challenges for many people. Technology, its reliability, and whether or not it is even able currently to transmit the colors and the beauty of the music. So, how do we go forward in that? Yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
I
Jeffrey,
mean,
you want to take it? Robert?
just go for it, just do,
Just do. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think, first of all, is there any mountain too high? And like when you come against an obstacle that can't be moved, that's usually when the real innovation begins, and you find maybe you're not going to take the path that you once thought. But to be honest, like when I was studying composition, I never thought I was going to be a producer. That just didn't. I just assumed I'd be a composer somewhere out,
No, I mean, yeah, proszę.
in the countryside, having people come and play like small chamber concerts, and I would teach and stuff like that. But when you face an obstacle, you take it on, and then you find out, whatever the challenges may be, and find it creative, and find. I mean, that's why we're artists. We find a creative way to get around it.
Jeffrey, pitch
I
in.
mean, I don't like to look ahead because we don't really know what's coming. So to me, it's you have to just take one day at a time, and they could turn around in September and say, "Oh, we got a vaccine. It's ready to be tested. It's been tested third stage, or it's ready to go." We're not. You can't. The worst thing to do is look at something and say, "Oh my God, we can't handle this." You just go with the flow and just take one day at a time. I don't think you could set goals for things the unknown. I think that's dangerous.
In the process, we're in the moment. I agree with you with the unknown. You can't plan for the unknown, but in the process, I hear a lot of voices from professional musicians saying that, okay, in this process, we got to just stop and wait and do nothing, because how do we connect the richness of our history and our tradition without making sacrifices in quality and culture?
But what you're doing now is actually reaching people this way. I mean, we have the technology, so there are ways to tide us over. And you don't want to stifle creativity, but you could certainly, more people are using technology now to communicate and to express than they did before. They took it for granted it was there. A lot of things were taken for granted. But I think that when it comes back, I call it a neo-renaissance. It's going to come back. Whether it's big or not, it's going to be felt differently. And I think that it's going to be appreciated more. And, I think that's important. I mean, it's funny, I wrote I told you about these two pieces that I wrote, which I could play. I may have to teach in a few minutes and go back to teaching, but I'm happy to play them. They're short
Yes, please.
pieces. I wrote them when it was when I felt caged in. It was the end of March. And in that month, 3 weeks being home, I felt like, you kind of felt caged in, like you don't know where the heck it's going to go. And then 2 weeks later, I wrote another one because you just start to feel this wanting to break loose. And then I haven't written one since. It's March 27 and April 12th. 2 pieces. That was it. I don't know if I'll write another one.
I hope you will.
Well, I don't know. I haven't felt the urge to do it, but I did those 2 times. I just did. You know,
Please welcome. Please,
you
so
want to hear
looking.
them?
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
let me. Robert said
Jeffrey,
to, and
what
then
the
want to
question?
interrupt with the. Okay, so these are just two pieces. One is March 27. One is April 12. They're both waltzes, but they're different. Um, I don't know what style they are. I mean, they could sound like Broadway songs. They could sound like Impressionism. They could sound like Chopin. I don't know what they
But
sound like,
this,
but they
they are
are.
music written when you felt like writing and not being
Yes,
caged in.
yes, during COVID. Yes, definitely. Totally in isolation at home. We were locked down. So here they are.
Jeffrey, bravo, bravo as a composer and as a pianist.
So,
This is fabulous. What a gift and what a beauty. Thank you so much.
thank you, thank
And
you.
I know you have to rush to your next
I have to go.
teaching.
Yes.
And I appreciate so much you sharing yourself, your talent, and your vision, and
Oh,
your
thank you.
gorgeous playing and your gorgeous composition with us. It's just been
Oh, thank you. I
a
was so
gift I'll
glad to
treasure
have.
forever.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here and to be here with Robert because we sometimes classical people get wrapped up in their own world. We do, and
Yeah, we do.
to hear Robert what he's doing is just so fascinating, and to hear the sounds that are coming out from what he's doing is just so beautiful, and uh, it's such a great time. I think this is really, honestly, it's rough. We know people who have had this virus, people who have passed from this virus. I mean, we've all gone through a lot of things, but this is the golden opportunity for us to not only stay as safe and well as we can, but if there's music inside of us, now's the time to get it out. This is a pivotal point in this. It's a pivotal point for music. I mean, I always thought that periods of music would happen because of an upheaval. There's always been something that would happen that would create the next period of music to happen. And if you look back in time, there's always kind of been that way. I
Yeah.
think this is one of them. I've been saying neo impressionism for 4 years since Kenneth Fuchs wrote his piano concerto for me. I've been saying neo impressionism, which is a sound world that sounds like it's like Debussy and Ravel and Satie and all that, but it's almost like in a new way. And I think sometimes when people go through, when humanity goes through something like this, it really creates and stirs up a lot that ordinarily might not happen. And I think that they start to work together in a different way. They start to make music and create music in a different way. Um,
Mhm.
it also pulls down the curtain for humility. There's more humility in a way. Sorry that it takes something like this for that to happen.
Yeah.
I think people start to, tear down that, thinking what's important really isn't important, and the things that they're used to having they don't have, and that it just recreates things and it creates things in a different way. I think music's going to be interesting in a year from now. I
Mhm.
hope. I'm hoping composers are busying themselves writing music and uh, just have it ready. Just be ready.
Mhm.
You know.
That's a beautiful, beautiful way to put it,
Oh,
Jeffrey.
it's so
Very
hopeful,
encouraging.
isn't
Uh, it's
it? So
hopeful because
hopeful.
it's so true,
What
and
else do we
because
have?
it's really because it's real. Be ready, be doing your thing, be adhering to what you love and what really matters.
Right.
I can't agree more. And I hate to say goodbye to our guest, Jeffrey Beagle. I know you have to go to
Have
your
to.
next students. Your students are luckiest people in the world to have you
Oh,
teaching
thank you. No, I have a wonderful group at Brooklyn College, and we're always accepting new wonderful students. It's a great place, new school, and
them.
but the Sonata Piano Camp is wonderful. I've been teaching for them, and Inside Music Academy, run by Anthea Creston, is wonderful, and she's running an incredible. They're doing such wonderful things. They're there because the kids need it, and they're there to nurture the kids' souls during all of this, and they're keeping the kids active and busy and musical and creating, and that's what we got to do. We have to make sure that their kids are busy because it's a tough time for them.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. And the adults too. There's a lot of adults in the summer sonata piano camp. Sonatina for the kids and sonata for the adults. And some of the kids are filtering in from Sonatina this week for the sonata camp, and they're just great. They're really terrific. So it keeps us busy, but it also keeps our souls nourished too, to be able to do that with everybody. So thank you for inviting me to be here and to share
And
my music,
thank
other
you.
music, and talk about these things. I mean, it's important that everybody keeps talking, communicating, and we have the technology to do it. We got to use it, and
I agree with
it's
you.
very
Got it.
helpful. So I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and hopefully we'll get more shows, and you'll get this where you want, and it will. I mean,
Mhm.
this is a perfect alternative to what people don't have, and even when that all comes back, this shouldn't stop.
I don't think it will. I think
No.
this connects us in a new way, and it definitely connected all of us, our team, and our virtual concert halls to you and
Yes,
Robert, and we're forever grateful for
absolutely.
that.
Well, thank
And
you so much.
Thank
Thank you.
you. And we hope to see you back again in our
We will do
program.
it. Absolutely.
We'll do more projects together. Bye,
Thank you.
Jeffrey.
Bye.
Bye.
See
Wonderful to
you.
see you.
Bye
And
bye.
let's bring now Robert back, and we are ready with your piece, which I can't wait to hear. So let's have. Do we have it ready, please? Can I get it on the stage? Yes, and Robert too, please. I'm going to add my applause to that enthusiastic audience on this recording, on this video. This is a very interesting sounds, almost like you're up in the mountains.
A very pre-pandemic video.
Hmm. It is.
Uh,
Now, this time on the program is nearly not enough. It's just way too short for us to be able to really explore all the topics which are burning important to a lot of professional musicians and for the audience. We will be continuing to discuss this topics with both Robert and Jeffrey, and we want to invite our audience to our runoff podcasts, which will be up in the next couple of weeks. And Robert, I really want to thank you so much for doing what you're doing for musicians,
thank you.
um, composers and performers alike, because we get in, as I'm a performer, as a concert pianist, I get introduced to music I never even imagined existed. So much imagination there. It opens up my own imagination and opens up new venues, new ways of thinking, new ways of expressing music. Even though I'm not a composer, I'm not playing my own music, I'm playing music by others. And thank you for doing what you're doing. And thank you so much for coming to our program and for bringing your fantastic projects on the virtual concert hall stage. We're really thrilled and proud to represent your vision and your group's here in the very close future. We'll be airing our programs in a couple of 3 weeks now. It's
Yeah,
really
I'm
coming
looking
up.
forward to it.
I'm very excited, and I know we can pull it. We will. And also, I would like to announce, please join us again on July 11th for our next program at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. The next program is dealing with impossible internet latency. We will welcome Dr. Mikhail Shostak. He's a phenomenal organist, a published author, and professor of the Warsaw University in Poland. He'll be joining us from Poland. Um, and he'll be bringing in the wisdom and understanding and tips of how organists deal with the mix of latency when they are performing in huge cathedrals. And he'll explain in a very interesting presentation about details of that latency from the biggest Warsaw Cathedral Basilica. And joining him in the panel discussion, we'll welcome Michelle Kim, fabulous violinist, member of the Kennedy Center Opera House Orchestra in Washington, D.C. She's an acclaimed soloist on both acoustic and electric violin, and she'll be discussing her experience with latency, which she experienced while performing with others in chamber music ensembles on electric violin. And again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, our fabulous guests, for sharing yourself, for bringing richness to this world and to this program. And I would like to also thank our fantastic team, Fedor Spensky, Frane Rusinovich, and Igor Zubkovsky, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes and made this program possible. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day. See you again soon. Bye.